Mayo experience, continuing our coverage of the 2018 fantasy baseball season. If you're looking for past shows on, let's say, sleepers and busts, draft strategy, undervalued players, rankings, check the description. Whether you're watching the video or listening to the podcast, it will all be in there. One click, and you're going to be right on it, all right? So go do that. Also, give the episode a like, leave a review, do all that fun stuff. Today, I am talking bounce-back players, pitchers, hitters, both of them, and maybe even more than two, or maybe more than one. Who knows? But Garion Thorne's here. What's up?
Hello.
You're back!
I'm back, I know. It's almost like I never left.
I was using, like, other baseball people.
Yeah.
Did it make you feel bad?
No.
You know your glasses? I mean, besides looking vaguely like women's glasses, my fake glasses, which I used to wear with my diamond earrings, used to look almost identical
I know.
to that.
I was a little worried about wearing them because I felt like people might just assume that I found your old glasses and have been keeping them from you.
Mine were bigger.
Yeah. Mine also have real
mine didn't have real lenses.
Yeah. These are, like, I really could probably not have to wear these.
You're like 6 months away from earrings, I'm telling you. Big diamond earrings. I feel like my lobes are still open. I can still put mine in.
I'll say I lost a bunch of weight in high school, and my secret then was essentially I was too lazy to pack my lunch, and I was too broke to buy lunch. And I feel like the thing keeping me from earrings is the same general concept. I'm too broke to get into, like, a Fabergé egg kick.
Well, the earrings I bought, you bought the small ones, the medium ones, and the big ones at, like, Claire's for, like, 20 bucks.
That's obtainable.
Good value.
Yeah, that's not bad.
All right, let's get into these players. Let's start with pitchers. Who you got first?
We can talk about Jeff Samardzija first.
The Shaq.
The Shaq.
The Greg Norman of baseball.
It's probably not going to take a whole lot to have people buy into Jeff Samardzija. The problem is Jeff Samardzija has what I like to call Chris Archer syndrome.
Oh, no.
Which essentially is he can't win a game, which is dumb. We shouldn't really hold that against a pitcher, but it's a 5x5 world, and wins matter. So really, when you're looking at win expectancy for Jeff Samardzija this season, the first thing you have to look at, obviously, is the other 24 men on the San Francisco Giant roster. And it seems, I mean, look, you can't really go any lower than rock bottom, so they're already looking up in that aspect. Fangraphs has them going from a 64-win team last season to an 82-win team in 2018. So already, it's a better team, it's a better situation. We still know AT&T is a fantastic pitcher's ballpark. And Samardzija, you would think that maybe one of these years luck would be on his side. I mean, he is someone who, since he became a full-time pitcher in 2012,
is very undercursed.
Very undercursed, apparently, because of the 24 guys over that span of time to start at least 170 games. And he's not even, like, right at that threshold. He's at 190 starts. He's won the fewest games of those 24 pitchers. He's won just 56 times. He's been on some bad teams. That's part of it. But he's also, I mean, you look at his FIP ERA differential from last season, almost a full run of difference between his FIP and his ERA. His FIP is down in the mid-threes. His ERA was up at 4.42. And a big part of that was his strand rate was ridiculously low, especially for a guy who's not an elite strikeout caliber pitcher, but someone who is around a strikeout per inning pitched. He actually had his highest strikeout rate since back in 2012. So he had a really good season, lowest walk rate of any qualified pitcher. The whip keeps real low with Jeff Samardzija. The only question is, can this guy ever win a game? And I think that at his price point, because you look at...
Where's he going right now?
He's going around pick 130 to 140, sort of that range depending on who you're drafting with.
All right, so let's say he ends up getting an additional 5 wins this year.
Top 100 player.
Top 100 player?
Easily.
Okay.
Easily. And that's the thing. I mean, his career high in wins is 11. It seems kind of strange. I mean, this is one of those things where I don't like talking about wins, but when it's year after year after year after year, you almost have to start questioning what the hell is going on with this guy. And Samardzija is also someone who works deep into games. He gives himself opportunities to not have games blown by the bullpen.
So what you're saying is that the bullpen doesn't like him and the players don't try hard for him.
It's very possible. It's very possible that there's subterfuge afoot here in San Francisco, but I think if you look at what he does, what his skill set is, and really just, I think the going deep into games and the depth he gives is also an important factor. As we talked about the last couple times I've been here, like, it's hard to find pitchers who on paper you can project to throw 200 innings this season. Jeff Samardzija has thrown 200 innings in 5 consecutive seasons. And he's actually one of just 10 pitchers last season to rack up 200 innings and 200 strikeouts. And it's funny, when you look at the ADP of the other 9 guys, all 9 of those guys are going inside the top 55 players. Carlos Martinez is going the latest of the 9 around pick 53. So we're just going at 135. Like, he's just the outlier. And I understand that sometimes guys are outliers for a reason, but it seems like you're very sound in taking a chance on Jeff Samardzija because you know he's going to be a good whip guy because the walks are never going to be there. He's a decent strikeout guy. And like you said, 5 more wins, and you're laughing.
All right, who's next?
We'll talk about Kevin Gausman. Because there's a weird sort of like presence around Kevin Gausman, and I understand why.
He gets presents?
No, not really. Gausman was bad last season. There's really no way around just navigating his first half. He was awful. He was one of just 3 qualified pitchers to rank inside the top 10 or bottom 10, depending how you want to look at it, in runs allowed and walks.
That sounds pretty good. That sounds like a guy I want.
Yeah. He's taken notes from Ubaldo Jimenez in the clubhouse, I guess. He was terrible last season for the first half. Post All-Star, he comes out sub 3.5 ERA, 9.64
Oh my God, he was sub 3.5
9.
ERA in the second half last year, and his numbers still look like that?
Still terrible.
Ugh.
5.85 ERA in the first half. Awful. Again, he was atrocious. But when you have situations like this, and you're contemplating someone who can possibly bounce back from something, I mean, I'll equate it for a second to Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish is someone who right now is going around like SP 15. And one of the big reasons for that is...
Does well in the sun.
Sure. But everyone saw him get rocked in the World Series. And, you know, even the most educated fantasy baseball players, that's right before you click draft, in the back of your head, you're like, this guy sucked the last time I saw him. And not even just like, he was bad, he was hit around. Like, he was terrible. But at the very least, there was a tangible reason to have some confidence this season that, you know, the report came out, as crazy as it sounded for Yu Darvish, it was good news that he was tipping his pitches. Because it at least gave you a reason. It's, okay, he's not hurt, he's not losing velocity on his fastball. He was doing something to really just negate his own effectiveness. So at least there's a reason for this. That reason, that tangible thing you can hold on to for Kevin Gausman is his splitter usage. Because there is a theory, there is evidence to suggest he figured out mid-season, hey, maybe I should throw my best pitch more often. Novel concept.
Sneaky.
I know, right? Like, hitters won't see it coming. So he went the first 2 months of the season throwing a splitter about 14% of the time. That jumped up to about 23% over the final 4 months of the season, really spiking in July when he turned everything around at about 28%. Now, it's pretty easy concept to figure out that when you're throwing your splitter, which is generally signified as a closing pitch, an out pitch, you're probably ahead in the count, you're probably doing better. So these things all line up for Gausman. The scary thing about that narrative, and the reason you might want to step back a little bit, is that this is not the first time we've seen this. 2017 was very similar to 2016. 2016, he starts off the year not throwing a splitter a whole lot. He sucks. Starts throwing a splitter more when the weather heats up, and he's good. Now, Eno Saris wrote a really good piece about this back in 2016, and there was a difference, a slight difference, but still a difference, in splitter effectiveness in cold weather, in early season games. And he actually talked to Gausman about this, and Gausman came out and said, I like pitching when it's warm. I like having a sweat built up when I pitch. So when you're drafting him, maybe you're like also putting your Mike Trout cap on and playing meteorologist and hoping that we have unseasonably warm weather in Baltimore to start the season. But I think with where he's going, I'm doing the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational right now, which is an experts league. There's 13 different leagues, 15-man leagues, each of them.
Oh, that sounds tedious.
It's a long draft. It's a long draft. It's a slow, long draft. Gausman just went outside the top 250 in my league. That's crazy. He's got so much potential. It's not like this guy is coming out of nowhere, undrafted out of college, no pedigree. We've thought this guy should be good for a while now, and he's shown flashes, prolonged flashes across the second half of 17 and 16 that he can be good.
You just trade for him in June? June 1st, just trade for him?
That's not a crazy way to think about it. I don't even know if you can trade for him. Like last season, you got him for free. Last season, he was on the waiver wire very quickly, and I think people have a similar thought process when it comes to Gausman this season. If he stinks out of the gate, he doesn't have much of a leash. People are not going to be wanting to hold on to this guy. So maybe you avoid drafting him and pick him up the scrap heap when someone gives up hope. That's a perfectly fine way to go about it. You could also just take him at pick 280, because who the heck cares who you're drafting at 280, and leave him on your bench to start the season. Like, there are many ways to go around this, but getting that kind of skill set, getting a guy who is possibly a 9.5 strikeout per inning guy with a sub 3.5 ERA past pick 250. Not a lot of opportunities for that situation. So I think Gausman is good in that sense.
All right, another pitcher. One more.
Aaron Sanchez.
Oh, Aaron Sanchez.
Yes, Aaron Sanchez of the California Sanchezes. This one's an easy kind of narrative, old-fashioned fantasy narrative.
He was hurt?
He was hurt last season. It sounds strange, though, but that was probably the best thing that could have happened outside of actually drafting Aaron Sanchez last season. I pay my respects to those who did that. But he was way too overvalued last season.
People were hyping him up as like a potential AL Cy Young sneaky guy.
I mean, you really just have to track what happened with Aaron Sanchez because, again, people let postseason perceptions kind of murky their view on fantasy. Pitched really well in the playoffs for the Jays. Was actually, I mean, people forget this even though it was very recent in the past. He was the AL leader in ERA in 2016.
Yeah, but how did his fit match up when he had that low ERA?
It wasn't... It was okay. It was in the high threes. Like, we're not talking about a huge separation, but he was someone who benefited from a low BABIP. He's someone who is just not a strikeout pitcher. Here's the thing with Sanchez. Like, where you were drafting him last season, around pick 100, maybe 110, he needed to be someone he wasn't. He needed to be someone who was bordering and hovering around a strikeout per inning. He's never been that guy. Even pitching in the bullpen, where generally speaking, your strikeout numbers go way up. It went from like 9.65 K per 9 career to 9.68. He's got no difference. Now, if he can pitch like in 2016 and be around 7.5 strikeouts per 9 innings, that's not awful. That's acceptable.
You meant to say 6.9, not 9.6, right?
Yeah, sorry, 6.9.
I say 9.6 sounds fine.
Nowhere near 9.6. Under 7 strikeouts per 9. But if he can be slightly above 7.5, that's acceptable with the levels of ERA and WHIP he could be. Now, I'm a little hesitant to be like, Aaron Sanchez is a ratios guy because he's someone who's always struggled with control. When you're hovering over 3 walks per 9 most of your career, I don't know if you're a WHIP guy necessarily. But we know he has the potential to be a SP2, a low-end SP2, high-end SP3 type player. And right now you're getting him about 150 picks after where he was going last season.
So he's going in the mid-200s.
Going in the mid-200s right now. Early to mid-200s. And it's just, that's deep for a guy like this. Again, he is not someone who should be taken inside the top 150. I don't think he's ever going to be that guy. Like, it's easy to equate him to Stroman because they're teammates, but they really are very similar. They're guys who rely heavily on ground ball rate. They're guys who rely heavily on not working deep into counts and just working deeper into games. They're great real-life pitchers who aren't the best fantasy commodities because the strikeouts just aren't there. Sanchez is someone who, you know, when you watch him pitch, he's a little like Joe Kelly-ish, where it's just like, wow, this guy throws 98 miles an hour.
Joe Kelly like borders on 100, yet somehow doesn't strike anyone out.
Can't strike anyone out. And that's the thing. Like, you look at Sanchez and you watch like him pitch against like Severino, and you're like, wow, these guys are so similar. But Severino has an out pitch. Aaron Sanchez does not. And he just hasn't figured that out yet. So I think he's someone...
Could you, I guess maybe he's too deep into his career to maybe figure this out and just randomly have it pop up, but could he have figured anything out?
He's been experimenting. And look, like...
With what, drugs?
Possibly.
Because that could help if it was PEDs.
Well, I mean, we all know that someone once threw a no-hitter on greenies.
On acid.
So, sure, it was on acid. Greenies were fine. Everyone was on greenies. I don't know. I mean, Severino's a good example, just in the sense, like, how these certain types of pitchers get labels thrown on them earlier in their career. Sanchez is someone who relies exceedingly heavy.
How old is he now? Like 25?
25, yeah. But he's, I don't want to say he's a one-pitch pitcher, but almost. Like, he's way up in the ranks in terms of, like, just usage of fastball. He's using his fastball as sinker about 68, 69% of the time.
Nice.
Which is real nice. But Severino, you look at him, when he had his bad season in 2016, everyone was saying, yeah, this guy's a two-pitch pitcher. He has to go in the bullpen. That's what's going to happen with this guy. And all of a sudden last year, he wasn't like busting down doors with his slider, but it goes from like 9.5% usage to like 14.5% usage. And that's enough. It's an effective pitch. Like, you just need something to put in the back of the minds of hitters. Sanchez, I mean, you look at the effectiveness of his sinker, I can understand why a pitching coach would go, yeah, just throw that. Like, if you're going to get a 65% ground ball rate and low opponent hard contact, like if we're talking a barrels percentage under 2%, which is well within the likelihood of what Aaron Sanchez can do, there's no reason a coach would go, this is amazing for real-life purposes. How about you try this so you're drafted a little bit higher on Yahoo? But it's just not going to happen. But I think with where his price point has fallen and with the pedigree we know he can have, it's just a good buying opportunity. And I think that if you're doing drafts like this week or next week, you might want to, if you really do want to get Sanchez, and I'm not saying he's someone you have to like really reach up and grab for, he's had a good couple spring training outings recently, and there's not a whole lot of stock I'll put into spring training often, but the one thing you should be using spring training for is
health.
Guys who are coming off of injuries, how do they look? And he's looked good. So just with his name value, there's a chance that even though I like him as a bounce back player right now at his current value, that he maybe gets a little too much helium and you can ignore him. So it really is, if you're having to draft him inside the top 200, like pick 180, that's about my like break-even point. I think if you're taking him at 180, he's probably a valuable asset to return value. Anything higher than that, it's too rich for my blood.
Even 178?
Even 178.
Wow.
I know.
How about some hitters?
Yeah, let's start with the St. Louis Cardinals.
Okay.
Kind of a fun situation, actually. I really like the top of their lineup. And it's funny when you look at how those four men are being drafted. You've got Marcell Ozuna.
Hit stings.
Huge season last year in a non-hitter's ballpark, so people are real excited. Not that Busch Stadium is like an amazing hitter's field,
It's
but
better than Marlins
anything's
Stadium.
better than Marlins Park. So Ozuna signs the massive free agency contract. He was already someone who was a young guy, the untapped potential, the prospect kind of fringe around him. People liked him a lot. So he's going as a top 50 player. You have Tommy Pham. Comes out of, I don't want to say nowhere. People knew about Tommy Pham, but like the Cardinals seemingly had like a stuffed outfield last season. Tommy Pham was in no one's fantasy, even peripheral last season. Gets an opportunity through a bunch of injuries, has an amazing season, and is now being drafted inside the top 50, which I kind of have to agree with because of the power stolen base combination that he brings to the table. Also, seems to have a really good approach at the plate. The other two guys inside the projected top four of that lineup are Dexter Fowler and Matt Carpenter. Now, both of these guys, not exactly people who are like the most confident in terms of their health currently. I mean, Dexter Fowler is actually super healthy. Baseball, much like football, we also have, this is the season of they're in the best shape of their lives.
Oh,
I will get into that a little bit later.
That's always good news.
But Dexter Fowler apparently has put on 15 pounds of muscle. He's moved from center field to right field. I guess in a player's head, there's a perception that comes with that you might have to hit more home runs as a corner outfielder. I don't know. I don't care.
Well, I mean, Dexter Fowler has a pretty good track record, at least historically, of being a good fantasy player.
Yeah, he's a good fantasy player. The problem with Dexter Fowler is this will be the start of his 10th like full major league season. Only once in those prior 9 seasons has he gotten to 600 plate appearances. Dexter Fowler is always on the DL. He and the DL have a very close relationship. So that's worrisome. Healthy right now, though, and is going outside the top 200. And I think Fowler, once you get past that certain point, like if you're looking at one, I mean, he's not this plus steals guy anymore, but he's someone who could probably get you like 10 to 12, which is, you know, that's fine from someone you're getting outside the top 200.
Yeah, it's 20 home runs, 12 steals.
And he's also more valuable in OBP leagues. But the reason that I like him and the reason that I like Carpenter is I do truly believe that this Cardinal offense is going to be really good. You look at just the player profile, the batting profile of these players. They are all so good at getting on base. All 4 of them were inside the top 50 in OBP last season. And it just seems like combined they could have, like, as crazy as it might seem, like a 380, 385 on base percentage. And at that point, you're talking about just tons of runners in scoring position, tons of runs scored, and just crazy offensive potential. Like, it's not surprising to know that of the 8 teams who scored 800 runs last season, the top 5 in OBP all contain those 8 teams. Like, 5 of the 8 are that top 5. Like, getting on base, you score runs. This is, go watch the first 15 minutes of Moneyball, come back, and we're on the same page at this point. So I just think that lineup can be really good. And Fowler is someone whose ADP, because of the rough start he had last season, because of the rough first half, the injury-plagued first half, he's now going like 60 picks later than he was last year. Matt Carpenter, it's like 120 picks later than he was going last season.
You like Carpenter last year.
I like Carpenter always, it seems like. He's still someone who, despite the fact he was nicked up for the entirety of last year, still played a bunch of games. Like, Carpenter, just from like a raw statistical profile, is not someone who you would go, oh, that's an injury-prone player, because he is actually, since going back to like 2012, the 13th, or he's had the 13th most plate appearances of any positional player who qualified. Like, he plays games, he gets on the field, and last season he still played enough first, enough second, and enough third where he's eligible at all those positions in most leagues. So he's already got that positional eligibility that
makes
everyone loves.
that makes me like him more in an NL-only league, too.
Oh, yeah. In an NL only, he is gold at certain points. Now, the problem with Carpenter, and the reason that his ADP might actually keep falling, and is a little bit more of a risk, I think, than Fowler at this point, because of the ADP as well, is in the last 2 weeks, we've seen Matt Carpenter go from guy who had back problem that Cardinals were like, don't worry about it, to guy who might not be ready for opening day.
Ew.
That's worrisome, but it could, again, create a bigger buying window for Carpenter.
So where's he going right now?
He's going around pick 180.
So he could drop below 225.
He could drop below 200. He could drop below 225, depending on the news we hear.
If you had to choose right now, knowing what we know today, would you draft him or Mike Moustakas?
I would draft Moustakas just because I think his ADP specifically has taken a hit for something that is not his fault in any way.
Well, he doesn't have a team.
He just doesn't have a team.
That's concerning.
But I think he's going to sign. I think that's...
You don't think he's going to sit the year out?
Well, look, even if he doesn't sign the opening day, there's still a chance he gets a plate appearance at the major league level before Matt Carpenter does. Like, that is a possibility that's on the table.
How do you not get signed?
It's a weird year. It's a really
like, how is Arietta not on a team yet? Maybe by the time people are watching this, they're on teams, but it just seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
Especially being a pitcher. Because you're going to have to go through extended spring training either way now.
Well, I just think that...
Can you, like, sign, like, a one-day contract with the team to, like, get a few reps in?
Well, there's an unsigned training camp.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Right now, yeah, which is kind of strange. But, no, I think that just with the way the contracts have been handed out, like, the discrepancy of money we thought J.D. Martinez was going to get in October versus what he actually got...
Was it more or less?
Way less.
Oh, really?
J.D. Martinez was someone who I think a lot of people were penciling in for, like, 5 years, 6 years, $200 million.
And he got?
In October. He gets, I think it was 6 years, $120 million.
Oh.
Which is great money, sure, but...
He's doing okay?
A lot less than I think most people thought he would get. So I would assume that right now we just have huge monetary discrepancies between the organizations and the agents. And now you've got the Players Association accusing, like...
Collusion?
Collusion against the owners. So there's a lot to unravel with that particular situation. But I think Moustakas signs. Like, some team who is contending is going to realize, like, we could probably use Mike Moustakas.
He could help.
And I think at some point, too, like, he and Arrieta, I don't know if this is a problem that gets solved in 365 days, so maybe this doesn't necessarily help, but maybe just sign a one-year contract and see what's happening next year. Cut your losses this year, try to stay healthy, bet on yourself.
I actually think if it comes to a one-year contract situation, I think that'd be a smarter move for Moustakas than Arrieta, because with a pitcher, if you take a one-year deal right now and you don't have a full spring training and you do
you could get hurt.
You could get hurt.
Yeah.
You might not be up to snuff at least through the first month of the year, and that could affect your stats. Even if you are fine down the stretch, that when people look at your overall totals, that you might not get that 4-year, $100 million contract or $50 million contract, that you might just take the 3-year deal that's out there now.
Yeah, it's probably a lot easier for Moustakas to play the future game. And look, Moustakas, there's a couple teams right now when you look at their roster and go, they could use a third baseman.
Who?
The New York Yankees could release a third baseman.
The Yankees?
And if Mike Moustakas signs in Yankee Stadium, I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards Mike Moustakas. But getting back to Carpenter, because again, I've painted a very negative picture of Carpenter right now. I do think, though, he's someone who had a rough BABIP here last year.
Still got on base a ton, like you mentioned.
383 on base percentage.
Hit over 20 home runs.
I mean, he kind of is what he is at this point. He's someone who's not going to hit 30 home runs. But
he scores a lot of runs.
That'll be down a little bit just because he's now projected to hit third. Like, Fowler is going to lead off.
Okay, so that means his RBIs will come up.
But again, as I mentioned, this quartet of players should always be on base. And I think Matt Carpenter is going to be in a situation where a high percentage of his plate appearances are plate appearances with not just runners on base, but runners in scoring position. And I think he is going to be someone who you can lean on for possibly the 90-run, 90 RBI kind of complement, depending on how many plate appearances he actually gets and depending how serious this back injury actually is. Now, the BABIP and batting average thing, like, he hit 241 last season. He's a career 275 hitter. Like, you would think that just with the sample size we have, that would be a very easy bounce-back perspective. Like, he's going to hit 270
He had a low
again.
BABIP. It affected his overall average. He goes back to normal. His average goes back to normal.
He took the Yonder Alonso story to heart. His fly ball rate was up over 50% last year. He had already kind of found, like, a nice... He was one of the early adopters of the... let's just hit more fly balls because fly balls are more valuable. he took it a little too far last season. And I do think that he is an educated guy, and he'll have... I think the St. Louis organization also realized that, hey, that probably didn't work out too well. So maybe we can just bring it back in just a little bit. Because he was around like 42, 43%. That's a good fly ball ratio to have as a guy you want hitting around 25 home runs. So just bring it back a little bit. I think he will. I think he'll be fine. So I do think Carpenter and Fowler, just because of the situation they're in, hitting atop that lineup, in a lineup that, again, should score a lot of runs.
All right. Any more hitters, or is that it? Just Cardinals?
No. I mean, we could talk about Kendrys Morales.
Kendrys?
Yeah.
Remember when he added was it the S to his name that he added randomly one year?
I think it was the S.
When he became Kendrys, he went from Kendrys Morales to Kendrys Morales?
It'd be the S or the Y, but I think it was the S. I think the Y was always there. Well, he didn't add this offseason. He subtracted, which was important. I'll say this. I subjected myself to far too many Kendrys Morales at bats last season. Was not pretty to watch last year. And I can understand why people are a little bit hesitant to take a guy who not only is coming off a bad season and is getting older, but also has no positional eligibility. He is someone you have to use in a utility spot.
You can use him at first base, depending on the...
If you're in the most generous of Yahoo leagues,
I was saying, if you play on Yahoo, he's probably a first baseman.
Depending on how the Jays want to go about it in National League play, he might be a first baseman.
What do you do with Smoke, then?
I mean, Smoke might just be bad again. There's a real chance that Morales just becomes Smoke from last season and Smoke becomes Morales from last season. That could definitely happen. But, again, watched a lot of Morales last year as a Blue Jays fan. Had watched a lot of Morales in the past just as someone who watched a lot of American League Baseball. When Kendrys Morales came to the plate for his first spring training at bat, I let out an audible gasp. He lost a lot of weight. It seemed like, and this isn't necessarily like he's going to be good because he lost a lot of weight thing, but it seems like he at least took his offseason very seriously. It's not going to make him faster.
Yeah, he doesn't have gut power anymore either.
Well, he says he put on he lost 12 pounds, but it was like he lost 20 pounds of fat and added 8 pounds of muscle.
Oh.
So he seems like he's in really good shape. He seems like he's someone who realized that, like, hey, if I keep letting what happened last year continue, my career is going to be over very, very soon. So that's at least a positive sign. Another nice sign, and I will put an asterisk on this particular statistic, because all statistics can be misleading. But if you're just looking at, hey, who should have done better last season? What stat could I pull out about the who should have done better machine? And there is a stat, expected WOBA versus actual WOBA, that the new StatCast is fantastic with. And he, aside from Miguel Cabrera, who, this is a whole other diatribe about the StatCast metrics at Comerica being a little wonky. Because it seemed like every Detroit Tiger was supposed to be a whole lot better than they actually were, and every Detroit Tiger has a 40% hard contact rate, so that could be a self-contained little weird thing. But Miguel Cabrera should be better too. But aside from Miguel Cabrera, no one had a bigger discrepancy, negative discrepancy, between their expected WOBA and actual WOBA than Kendrys Morales from last season. Now, that asterisk. Here's the thing with expected WOBA. Great stat. Love it a lot. The reason, or the way it calculates is expected WOBA takes the batted ball information, so launch angle and exit velocity, and says that in a vacuum, player X in stadium X, this should be a double 95% of the time. So, Morales is someone who, there are factors at play when he gets out of the batter's box, let's just say. Expected WOBA doesn't take into account that Kendrys Morales is a fatman.
Yeah, but he's no longer a fatman, so I think we're all okay.
Still a bit of a fatman.
Maybe a chubman, but not a fatman, a legitimate fatman.
Again, I don't think losing 12 pounds is going to make him not be the slowest player in baseball. Maybe he's not the slowest anymore. Maybe like he beats out like Yadier Molina.
Yeah, maybe Benji Molina re-signs somewhere and boom, you're no longer the slowest.
So the problem with that stat is, or you can look at it two ways. You can look at it and say he was making good contact last season. There's never a situation where making good contact is a bad thing. Or you can look at it and say, this is one of those outlier players where you can't take a stat like this seriously because, of course, Kendrys Morales is going to take a ball that should have been a double and make it into a single. I like to think that because he was so bad last season, he can really only go up at this point. And I also, again...
He did almost hit 30 home runs.
Regardless of how you want to look at the Blue Jay lineup, they had a bad year last year. Fangraphs still projects them to be one of just 5 teams to score over 5 runs per game this season. Which means he's in a good offensive environment, in a good lineup, and he's always hitting in the meat of the order. I mean, he had 608 plate appearances last season. 601 of those plate appearances came as either the third, fourth, or fifth hitter in the Jays lineup. This is a guy who should, I would think, challenge for 100 RBIs this season. If he can hit 30 home runs and drive in 100 guys and hit 270, he's now a 2.5 category player. You're getting outside the top 250.
Really, 250?
Oh yeah, no one wants anything.
No one wants skinny Kendrys?
No one is really buying into Kendrys Morales all that much.
So we see that you love Blue Jays, but we know that going in.
I watch them a lot, so I have a good.
You have real taste.
I know their baseline.
And you love Cardinals hitters. Is there anyone who's not on these teams that you like? No.
No, there is. There's one more. I'm just forgetting who he is.
Only draft Cardinals and Blue Jays.
Clearly, I love him so much, I'm forgetting him. Paul, who's my other player?
This guy punches Blue Jays.
Oh!
Old Rougned.
Rougned Odor.
Rougned Odor Jr. or just Rougned Odor Jr.?
No, he's Rougned Odor. He's just got a brother who's also named Rougned Odor.
Well, they have to, like, 1A, 1B?
I was going to say there's good Rougned Odor and bad Rougned Odor, but good Rougned Odor was terrible last season. I let my natural inclination to absolutely detest Rougned Odor kind of block my brain out there.
Where's he going in drafts?
Still going around pick 100. But last season he was going inside the top 40. And, one of our previous shows I was talking about.
Sick BABIP. 224.
Yeah, so that's a very easy starting point for a bounce back player. Like, hey, did this guy have the lowest BABIP of all 144 qualified hitters last season? He sure did. It's probably going to get better this season. And the important thing to remember about that, because I have to say that no matter how pretty a picture you can paint for Rougned Odor, he still is a flawed player fundamentally. He has one of the worst approaches. He is the anti-Dexter Fowler Matt Carpenter. He has no patience at the plate. He has consistently swing rates and no-swing rates that are off the charts. He's flawed. And that does create situations where, maybe if you swing at a pitch that's 1.5 inches off the ground, you're not going to make the best contact.
Vladimir Guerrero would have a lot to say about that.
Unless you're Vladimir Guerrero. So I'm not saying he's going to be someone who all of a sudden is like, oh, wow, he's got a 330 BABIP now. Like, I kept using the Jonathan Scope scenario, where Scope's BABIP last season was like 100 points higher than Odor's. It's not going to get to that level. He's a career 275 BABIP guy. But even just bringing back that career average would mean so much to someone who still, last season, was one of 8 guys to hit 30 home runs and steal 15 bases. I mean, the counting stats are there.
And if you make him a 250 hitter instead of making him a 200 hitter,
perfectly
now
fine.
He's not hurting you.
No, now he's absolutely fine. The worrisome thing, and again, you can always look at this stuff as either a positive sign for positive regression or just the start of a very worrisome trend. But you look at his stats from 2014 and 2016. Nothing about his hitting profile changed last year. So he was putting up those 280, 295 BABIPs, still swinging at as many pitches outside of the zone, still swinging and missing as often as he did. So that's a positive thing. That says that last season was an anomaly. But the fact that he struggled as much as he did against left-handed pitching is worrisome just in the sense that maybe the Rangers at some point, who consider themselves a contending team, look at their left-handed hitting second baseman and go, maybe it's time for a platoon.
Yeah, you see, you say that, though, but I was looking at the Rangers pitching staff, and it's not very good, so I don't think they're going to care all that much.
And that's the thing, too, is with the way managing baseball teams has gone, there's always this conversation, like we're hearing a lot this week alone about, there's a possibility we're going to break out a 6-man rotation. A lot of people are disregarding Astros pitchers because they're going to have a 6-man rotation. A lot of teams are like, we've got 8 good relievers right now. Maybe we'll just carry an 8-man bullpen for most of the season. When you start doing that kind of stuff, there's not a whole lot of bench opportunity to be like, oh yeah, here's our right-handed hitting second baseman who we only use on days there's a left-handed pitcher. So he's got that going in his favor. Because
yeah, but all you have to do is like put people on the 4-day ADL or something. That's not that big of a deal.
Well, the 7-day ADL is if you get concussion. So just have like
you're gonna have someone walking around
touch
like
Adrian Beltre's head, have him punch you in the face.
You're gonna have someone walking around like an old school Looney Tunes mallet and just bopping people over the head.
I mean,
that would be my solution.
Rougned Odor.
I am a forward thinker, though.
That's true. You are an innovator, and that's baseball needs innovators, according to Rob Manfred. So again, I don't think that's going to happen, but he was so awful against left-handed pitching last season. He had a 12 WRC plus against left-handed pitching.
Tell me what that is.
weighted runs created.
Okay.
So essentially in a neutral ballpark, just what is your offensive contribution to your team? So about a league average WRC plus is 100.
And his was what?
12.
Oh, that's not good.
Against left-handed pitching. There are negative WRC pluses. So slightly better than the absolute bottom of the barrel.
Who would be?
Down negatives?
Yeah.
I don't even know who had a negative one last season. That's usually like in the month of July, someone had a negative WRC
Came up
plus.
and then got sent back down.
I would say like he is that type of player, the profile. Like I would assume off the top of my head that Tim Anderson had a negative WRC plus at some point last season.
Do you know why?
Because he never walks. And he's
very cursed.
Very cursed.
Maybe the most cursed athlete there is.
It's not his fault.
No, it's not, but it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Cursed. Poor guy.
Poor guy. But, again, from 2014 to 2016, Rougned Odor, any metric you really want to use. Not that he was exactly the same against lefties and righties, but the difference was very minimal. Like, we're going from a 266 hitter to a 261 hitter against lefties. We're going from a 105 WRC plus against righties to like a 95
So
WRC
down,
plus
but
against
not
lefties.
alarmingly.
Not off a cliff. Not a guy who you would go, this is someone who's got a platoon profile. He can hold his own against lefties. He's better, as most left-handed hitters would be, against right-handed pitching. But last season it was just terrible. And the BAPIP was at 161 against lefties. So already taking a terrible 224 BAPIP and just multiplying it to the nth degree. Like, he was so unlucky against lefties. Only one guy had a lower BAPIP against left-handed pitching, and it was Todd Frazier. And you just want to compare the profile of those two players. Like, Todd Frazier had a 59% fly ball rate against left-handed pitching. So essentially, Todd Frazier had the approach against lefties. That was 6% higher than anyone else in baseball. Either it was leaving the park, or it was a lazy fly ball. That is a profile that deserves a 150 BAPIP. Rougned Odor didn't deserve a 161 BAPIP against left-handed pitching. So I think that rebounds. I think in general the BAPIP just rebounds. And again, if he's going to hit 30 home runs and steal 15 bases, there's already not a ton of guys who can do that. So if he can do it with a 250, 260 average, hitting in the middle of a Texas Ranger order, that should, again, be at least a league average offensive team in a good ballpark out there in Arlington. I think you've got yourself a value at pick 100.
So let's say he's going at pick 100. How far do you reach up on him to make sure that you end up getting him?
I wouldn't reach.
But by reach, being like, what if I'm at pick like 81? I'm like, oh, I could use a guy that hits 30 home runs and steals 15 bases with the potential for maybe a little bit more. It sounds like,
yeah,
because Samardzija is going a little bit after that kind of thing,
yeah,
who you mentioned earlier, that if one of them is going to break into like the top 50 this year, it sounds like Odor would be that guy.
It's probably Odor. I would say that there is a tier of player and a point in the draft from about pick 75 to pick 100 that even doing mock drafts and doing real drafts that I've done so far this season, I'm not really in love with any of the players in that particular tier. I find a lot of the time I find myself just taking a closer at that tier because
Who's the closer? Who are the guys in that range?
I like kind of drafting at the back end of the closing tier, so I'm not getting Jansen a lot. You know, I'm not getting the top echelon of guys, but I think like Osuna I like a lot, Cody Allen I like a lot. Even Edwin Diaz, coming off a really bad season, I think he's probably like the value guy in that tier. But you know, just guys who you have a level of confidence that they're not going to lose their job at some point this season, or they're not going to be traded at some point this season. So in that respect, if you don't want to find yourself just taking a guy because you don't like anyone else, maybe take a shot with Odor. But I will say, for as much as I do think he's going to bounce back, he is someone whose profile is very volatile. So his chances of being a top 50 player are there. His chances of being outside the top 200 again are also definitely there. Like, again, he is a fundamentally flawed player when it comes to his approach at the plate. So that's why I'm not necessarily looking to reach up and grab this guy. But if he falls to you at pick 100, it's not a situation where you're worried about taking him. I think that's a great value for him. I'm not saying you can't reach up, because there are situations where he's going to bring back exceedingly good value even at pick 80. But it's a very volatile player. Jeff Samardzija, at the very least,
is safe.
Has a very reasonable number of outcomes, and all of them have him as a top 150 player this season.
So his floor is very high.
Floor is very high.
Odor's all over the place.
Odor's living out in the street. He's got no roof, but he's got no floor. So it's a little bit tougher. But you know, if you want to take a fantasy football approach where we draft teams to win and not finish in second, Odor is a guy who might end up on a lot of championship teams this season just because of the value he could create at pick 100.
All right, Garion Thorne, thanks for being here.
No problem.
Where can people read your works now?
Yeah, I'll be doing...
Standing on the side of the road, just yelling at people.
I'm that guy who comes up to you with a bushel of oranges. But instead of the... That's a misnomer, though. I just want to talk to you about baseball. Yeah, I'll be writing the two-start article this season for Fantasy Pros, so you can catch me over there. And I'll have some preseason work up on so-called fantasy experts as well.
All right. And you can be a contributor to the Pat Mayo experience as long as you
I'll
want.
probably be back here at some point.
Come in. I mean, yell it. We'll get Tim on. We'll do the win totals.
I haven't talked... Yeah, let's do win totals with Tim. I haven't talked to Tim in a long time. I have no idea what his baseball takes are for this season.
Neither do I. I've been really trying to stay away from it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been trying to stay away from baseball outside of like people who really know a lot. I don't need Tim influencing me, being like, "Oh, this guy's so good." It's like, do you even know who that is? No. That's usually how it works.
It's a good way to go. You know what? It's actually nice because I'll have finished essentially my entire prep by that point for the season, and I can really like know if I was right or wrong about my own personal thoughts on where he's standing on certain players.
Excellent.
So it'll be good.
This is great news. Follow Garion on Twitter at Garion Thorne. You can follow me at ThePME on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook, where you can just get a running list of all the content. All my work is up on the DKPlaybook.com. And for the video version, subscribe to the DraftKings YouTube page. Leave a like, leave a positive comment, not any of these negative ones like Garion's a nerd, which would be pretty accurate. That might actually be a positive comment for him. I don't know. Also, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio versions wherever you can download podcasts. Leave a review. It takes like 10 seconds. Really helps out. So do that, all right? Good luck this fantasy baseball season. I'll see you next time.